I tell you, now that'll get you going, won't it? I mean, we aren't stopping after this. We sure aren't. Well, I'll tell you, this lady has been speaking out for a long time, and she speaks to the extent that people go after her. And as Jesse said in his song, "Watching Your Back." Well, what we're going to do, it was kind of interesting where to put this next part in, whether before Cindy spoke or after Cindy spoke. And in a moment, you'll see a little bit about why I'm kind of wondering which way it should have gone. But I think this is good in that you're going to see something that Cindy has to put up with a lot. But this time it doesn't affect her. And you'll see in just a moment, because we have with us, you know, one of these characters of America that really, I mean, sometimes it's in the pit of your stomach and you just think, my God, I don't know if I can take any more of this stuff, because some of the venom and the hatred of things that we're trying to do, of stop a war and stop the killing. I mean, it's just really, really tough and terrible what people have to put up with. Daniel Ellsberg knows it very well. He's received a lot of it. Cindy's received a lot of it. And you have some people. Is that person around?
Yeah.
Well, you have some people that, I mean, you just kind of wish they weren't around. And you'll see.
Down in Crawford, Texas, protesting. The Cindy Sheehan mob is back down there at Crawford, Texas, but there's a twist. Cindy's not there. Cindy has a stand-in. Do you people remember? I've told you and I've warned you about this, that the people at the State Department, the careerists at the State Department, you might be surprised to learn, are not all pro-American, in the sense that they agree with the Bush administration policy. Here, the elected president and vice president have been accused by a former State Department official, former chief of staff to Colin Powell, Larry Wilkerson, of hijacking foreign policy. Imagine that! The elected officials of our country hijacked foreign policy. That's the attitude that exists in the State Department. The elected leaders are in charge of it. The elected leaders. The commander-in-chief and the vice president. There's no hijacking of foreign policy possible. But if you're in the State Department, that's your bailiwick. And you know, these presidents come and go. But you are the career diplomats, and you know what's best. And many of those people are career libs in that place. And you know what's best? And it would stun you, it would shock you to learn just how much fervent opposition to the Bush administration exists in there. And that's why they're not happy with Condoleezza Rice being there. So with that as a setup, a little story from the Associated Press. More than a dozen war protesters, a dozen! 12 bedraggled, dope-smoking FM types show up at the president's ranch and it makes the news. 12 people, folks. 12 people is an embarrassment. It's not a protest turnout. 12 people is an absolute embarrassment. Yet it makes big news with the Associated Press. More than a dozen war protesters returned to a roadside near President Bush's ranch before dawn Wednesday, defying two new local bans on roadside camping and parking. About an hour after the group pitched tents and huddled in sleeping bags and blankets, a McLennan County Sheriff's deputy arrived and warned the group to leave or face arrest. Protester and former U.S. diplomat Ann Wright told the deputy that most of the group would stay because they believed the bans restrict their free speech rights. The deputy said that the group would have 2 more warnings before he started making arrests. Anti-war activist Cindy Sheehan wasn't among the protesters Wednesday because of a family emergency in California, but she planned to arrive at the camp later in the week. She has a lot of family emergencies, Mr. Snurdly, that keep her from showing up in the front lines lately. Anyway, I know, she's got to go make the turkey. That's not going to make feminists happy, but the turkey comes before the protest march at Crawford. At any rate, you hear that the protester and former U.S. diplomat Mary Ann Wright, former U.S. diplomat. There's a former U.S. diplomat that's joined the Cindy Sheehan mob. In fact, standing in for Cindy Sheehan, Mother Sheehan. A former diplomat, Mary Ann Wright. Who is this? Well, I will give you a hint. She was in the State Department up until very recently and resigned. And now she's leading the anti-war protests of the Cindy Sheehan left. Former State Department official. More after the break.
Rush 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You're on air.
All right, we have an update on the anti-war protest at Crawford, Texas. These dozen war protesters have now been arrested for setting up camp near President Bush's ranch in defiance of new local bans on roadside camping and parking. It happened about 4 hours after the group pitched 6 tents and huddled in sleeping bags and blankets. The sheriff's deputies arrested them for criminal trespassing. Another dozen or so demonstrators left the public right-of-way after deputies warned them that they'd be arrested. This is a sorry bunch of protesters, folks. Real war protesters would get arrested. Real war protesters would hang around and try to, set fire to the cop cars. They do anything. They go to jail and claim they're doing it for peace. These people, they just turn tail and split the scene. Anyway, I've got to tell you about this former diplomat, Mary Ann Wright. She heckled Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice at Senate hearings, shouting, "Stop the killing! Stop the war! It's terrible!" She had a large hand in running Camp Casey for Cindy Sheehan. All of this in the website interviews that Mr. Snurdly found today. She spent 16 years as a State Department diplomat, animated, amused by her foibles, articulate and thoughtful. She's just the sort of person you'd want to defend and then represent your country. What is this stupid website, TomDispatch.com? A regular antidote to the mainstream. You ever heard of this guy? Anyway. Last August, she had a large hand in running Camp Casey for Cindy Sheehan at the president's doorstep in Crawford, Texas. On March 19, 2003, the day before the first cruise missiles were launched against Baghdad, Mary Ann Wright resigned from the Foreign Service in an open letter, a copy of which we have. From the U.S. Embassy of Mongolia, where she was then Deputy Chief of Mission, this letter of resignation sent to Colin Powell. In it, she wrote, in part,
"This is the only time in the many years serving America I felt I cannot represent the policies of an administration of the U.S. I disagree with this administration's policies in Iraq, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, North Korea, and curtailment of civil liberties in the U.S.